Princess Silara sat in her grand room, her heart racing with fear. Outside, the royal palace of R'hllora buzzed with activity. Servants hurried down the halls, carrying fine silk robes and trays of sparkling jewels. The palace was preparing for a very special guest, but for Silara, this was a day of dread. Silara's father, King Velryn, had just informed her that she was to marry a human, a man named Captain Eric, known across the galaxy as the Ruthless Human. She had heard terrible stories about humans, especially about this one. People whispered that Captain Eric was a warrior with a heart of stone, a man who showed no mercy on the battlefield. The thought of marrying such a man made her shiver. Why must I marry him? Silara had asked her father, her voice trembling. King Velryn looked at her with a serious expression. To save our kingdom, my daughter, he said. The humans are powerful, and we need peace with them. This marriage will unite our people and protect R'hllora from war. Silara tried to protest, but her father shook his head. This is the duty of a princess, he said firmly. You must think of our people. Silara felt trapped. She didn't want to marry a human, especially not one with a reputation as frightening as Captain Eric's. She had never even met a human before, but she imagined them to be tall, fierce, and harsh, with cold, unfeeling eyes. Her friends told her stories about humans who could crush metal with their bare hands and who had no compassion for anyone. To think that she would soon be bound to one of them in marriage was a nightmare. As the hours passed, her anxiety grew. She could hear her servants preparing the palace, talking in hushed voices about the ruthless human who would soon arrive. Silara wondered if they were as scared as she was. She could see the fear in their eyes as they worked. They would glance at her sympathetically, as if understanding the weight on her shoulders, but no one dared say a word. Finally, Silara could take the tension no longer. She called for her closest servant, a young girl named Lyra, and whispered, "Tell me the truth, Lyra. What do you know of Captain Eric? Is he truly as ruthless as they say?" Lyra hesitated, her face pale. "Princess, I've only heard tales," she replied softly. "They say he's a fierce warrior, that he leads his men into battle without fear. He has won many wars, and his enemies tremble at the sound of his name." Silara's heart sank. She felt a shiver down her spine. This was exactly what she feared. How could she ever face such a man, let alone marry him? Would he be cruel to her? Would he see her as nothing more than a duty, a piece in a political game? She walked to the balcony, looking out over the palace grounds. The gardens were beautiful, filled with flowers of every color. She remembered playing there as a child, running freely among the flowers, feeling safe. But now, that safe world seemed so far away. Her life was about to change forever, and she felt completely powerless to stop it. As she stared at the horizon, a dark shape appeared in the sky, a large silver spaceship coming closer. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew this must be Captain Eric's ship. The humans had arrived. Silara's stomach twisted with fear. She wanted to hide, to run away and escape this horrible fate. But she knew there was nowhere to go. The whole kingdom was depending on her to keep the peace. She was a princess, and this was her duty, even if it meant marrying a man she had never met and who she feared with all her heart. She watched as the ship landed in the palace courtyard. Soldiers and officials gathered to greet their important guest. Silara stepped back from the balcony, not wanting to be seen. She could barely breathe as she imagined the ruthless man who was stepping out of that ship. What would he look like? Would his face be as cold and hard as the story suggested? In her mind, she pictured him as tall and intimidating, with dark eyes that held no kindness. She imagined him wearing heavy armor, his face scarred from battle, his expression stern and unforgiving. The thought of meeting him made her hands tremble. In that moment, Silara felt utterly alone. Her father was depending on her. Her people were watching. And she had no choice but to accept her fate. She took a deep breath, trying to gather her courage, but inside, her fear only grew stronger. As the palace echoed with the sounds of Captain Eric's arrival, Solara made a silent promise to herself. No matter how scared she felt, she would face this ruthless human. She would do her duty, even if her heart was filled with fear. She hoped, somehow, that she would survive whatever awaited her with this mysterious, terrifying man. The human arrives. Princess Solara stood near the balcony, her hands clasped tightly together as she watched Captain Eric's spaceship land in the palace courtyard. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. The moment she had feared was here. The ruthless human had arrived. The royal guards lined up to greet him, standing tall in their polished armor. King Velrun was there as well, his face calm but serious, ready to welcome the man who would marry his daughter. Solara could see the nervous glances between her people, the way they whispered to each other as they waited for the human to step out of the ship. Everyone seemed tense, as if unsure of what this human might do. Solara's heart pounded as the spaceship door slowly opened, revealing the man she had feared for so long. She held her breath, expecting a huge, intimidating figure with a cold, cruel face. But as Captain Eric stepped out, Solara's eyes widened with surprise. Eric was tall, yes, and he carried himself with strength, but he looked ordinary. He wore simple clothing, not heavy armor, and his face was calm, not fierce. He didn't have any visible scars or the terrifying expression she had imagined. Instead, his face held a quiet, focused look as he observed his surroundings. His eyes were sharp but not unkind, and his movements were controlled, almost gentle. Solara couldn't believe it. Was this really the same ruthless human she had been so terrified of? She squinted, watching his every move, searching for some sign of the monster she had heard about. But there was nothing harsh in his manner. He simply nodded to her father and exchanged a few respectful words. He looked more like a soldier than a warrior without mercy. Curiosity mixed with her fear. She felt her heart beating faster, not from terror, but from an odd sense of wonder. Captain Eric didn't look or act like a ruthless man. He seemed more like someone who understood the weight of his duty, just as she did. But still, she couldn't let her guard down. She knew that appearances could be deceiving. Maybe this calm, polite behavior was just a mask. Maybe, beneath it, he was as ruthless as the stories said. She shivered at the thought and took a small step back, hiding further behind the curtain. As Eric and King Velrun walked into the palace, Solara slipped out of the room and moved quietly down the halls, keeping a safe distance. She wanted to see more of this man, to understand him better before they finally met. She was determined to find out who he really was. From behind a pillar, she watched as Eric spoke to a servant who had accidentally spilled a tray of fruit on the floor. The servant trembled, his eyes wide with fear, but Eric didn't yell or show anger. Instead, he bent down, picked up a piece of fruit, and handed it back to the servant with a small smile. "No harm done," he said calmly, his voice low and even. Solara blinked in surprise. She had been sure he would react with anger, maybe even punish the servant for such a small mistake. But instead, he had shown kindness, a simple, quiet kindness that was unexpected for someone with a ruthless reputation. She continued to follow him, feeling her fear slowly mix with curiosity. Eric moved through the palace with a calm confidence, never once showing aggression or impatience. He greeted everyone he met with respect, even the lower-ranking servants. To her surprise, some of the palace workers began to relax around him, seeing him as someone they could approach without fear. Solara felt her fear start to fade, replaced by a strange feeling she couldn't quite name. She didn't want to admit it, but this human was different from what she had expected. Her mind raced with questions. Was the ruthless title just a story, something made up to scare people? Or was there more to him than she had realized? As she followed him, Eric suddenly turned in her direction, his gaze landing directly on her. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly ducked behind a large vase, hoping he hadn't seen her. She held her breath, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Why was she spying on him? What was she hoping to find? After a moment, she peeked around the vase, and to her relief, Eric had already turned back to his conversation with one of her father's advisors. He hadn't noticed her, or if he had, he didn't show it. Solara took a deep breath, her mind swirling with confusion. This human was a mystery, not at all what she had imagined. She didn't know if she should still fear him or if she should try to understand him. For the first time, she felt a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, this marriage wouldn't be as terrifying as she had thought. But deep inside, a small voice reminded her to be careful. After all, she barely knew him. And no matter how kind he seemed, he was still the ruthless human. The stories couldn't all be wrong, could they? Secret observations. Princess Solara couldn't get Captain Eric out of her mind. He was nothing like the terrifying human she had expected. She kept thinking about how he'd smiled at the servant who dropped the fruit, how calm and respectful he seemed. Her curiosity only grew. She wanted to understand this man who would soon be her husband. So Solara began watching him from the shadows. She felt a bit silly sneaking around her own palace, but she was determined to learn more about him before they had to meet face to face. The stories about him still haunted her, but her heart told her there was more to this human than the rumors. She wanted to see the truth for herself. One morning, she found herself hiding behind a pillar near the training grounds. Eric was there, practicing with some of the palace guards. She watched closely, trying to see if his ruthless side would appear in the way he fought. Maybe in combat, she would see the fierce, cold warrior everyone talked about. Eric picked up a wooden training sword and faced one of the guards. They began sparring, moving back and forth across the training ground. Solara expected him to fight with all his strength, showing no mercy. But once again, he surprised her. His movements were smooth and controlled. He was fast and skillful, yet he never tried to overpower the guard. Instead, he taught the guard as they fought, correcting his stance and encouraging him with a patient tone. Solara's eyes widened as she listened to him. She had never seen a warrior act like this. Instead of crushing his opponent, he helped him improve. He even laughed lightly when the guard finally managed to land a hit on him. Eric congratulated the guard with a firm handshake, showing respect instead of pride. As the training ended, Solara quickly ducked behind a wall, her heart beating fast. She couldn't believe it. Eric didn't act ruthless at all. He was strong and capable, yes, but he was also kind and encouraging. She had expected a harsh warrior, but he seemed more like a wise teacher. The next day, Solara decided to follow him again, hoping to learn more about this human's strange nature. She saw him walking through the gardens, admiring the colorful flowers that bloomed under the Raloran sun. For a moment, Eric stopped to watch a small bird that had landed nearby. He smiled softly as the bird chirped, looking completely at peace. Solara was amazed. Could this really be the same ruthless human she had feared? He seemed gentle, almost thoughtful. She felt her fear slowly fading away, replaced by something she didn't quite understand. This man didn't seem like a threat. He seemed kind. As she watched him, Eric suddenly glanced in her direction. Solara's heart leaped in her chest, and she quickly hid behind a tree. She held her breath, hoping he hadn't seen her. After a few moments, she peeked around the tree and saw him looking away, continuing his walk as if he hadn't noticed anything. She let out a sigh of relief, but her cheeks burned with embarrassment. Why was she so interested in him? She was the princess, and yet here she was, sneaking around like a spy. But she couldn't help it. The more she watched him, the more she wanted to know. Later that afternoon, Solara hid near the dining hall, where Eric was having a meal with some of the royal advisors. She watched from behind a doorway, listening carefully to his words. To her surprise, he spoke respectfully, asking questions about their culture and customs. He didn't act like a conqueror or someone who thought he was better than them. Instead, he showed a genuine interest in learning about her people, something Solara had never expected. At one point, an advisor offered him a rare Raloran dish. Silara knew that the food could be too strong for anyone not used to it. She watched, expecting him to react badly, maybe even make fun of their food. But Eric took a careful bite, smiled politely, and complimented the chef, saying he appreciated the new flavors. Silara felt her heart soften as she watched him. He wasn't only strong and skilled, he was respectful and open-minded. Her fears seemed to melt away with every moment she spent observing him. This man was nothing like the monster she had imagined. As the day ended, Silara returned to her room, her mind filled with thoughts of Eric. She felt a strange warmth in her heart, a feeling she couldn't quite name. Was it admiration, curiosity, or perhaps something more? She didn't know. All she knew was that her fear had changed into something different. That night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about the human who was meant to be her husband. The more she learned about him, the less afraid she felt. Perhaps, she thought, this marriage might not be as terrible as she had first imagined. Maybe, just maybe, Eric was someone she could trust. But as she drifted to sleep, a small voice reminded her to stay cautious. She had only seen him from afar. She still didn't know who he truly was up close. For now, she would keep watching, hoping that her heart was leading her in the right direction. An awkward meeting. The time had finally come for Princess Silara to meet Captain Eric face to face. Her heart raced as she prepared herself, standing in front of the large mirror in her chambers. She smoothed her dress, trying to calm her nerves, but her hands were shaking. This was the man she was supposed to marry, yet she knew so little about him. She had spent days watching him from a distance, trying to understand him. Eric seemed calm and respectful, but now she would be standing before him. Silara didn't know how to act or what to say. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of her duty as a princess. She had to be brave, no matter how awkward this meeting might feel. When the doors to the grand hall opened, Silara stepped inside, her eyes immediately finding Eric's tall figure. He stood near the center of the room, his gaze focused as he waited for her. He looked just as calm as before, his posture strong yet relaxed. But when he saw her enter, he straightened slightly, giving her a respectful nod. Silara took a few hesitant steps forward, unsure of what to do. Should she bow? Greet him with formal words? Her mind spun with questions, but before she could decide, Eric broke the silence. "It's an honor to finally meet you, Princess Silara," he said in a deep, steady voice. His eyes held a gentle warmth, which took her by surprise. She had expected his gaze to be intimidating, but instead it was kind. Silara nodded, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Yes, it is an honor to meet you too, Captain Eric," she replied, her voice softer than she intended. She looked down, feeling a strange mix of shyness and curiosity. She had watched him from afar, but now, standing so close to him, she felt her heart beat even faster. An awkward silence settled between them. Silara searched her mind for something to say, but all the words seemed to vanish. Eric seemed to notice her hesitation and offered her a small smile. "I know this situation must be strange for you," he said gently, his tone understanding. "I'm here in your world, and we're supposed to be married, yet we barely know each other." Silara looked up, surprised by his honesty. He wasn't pretending that everything was easy or perfect. He understood her worries. His words made her feel a bit more comfortable, and she managed a small smile. "Yes, it is unusual," she admitted softly. "I have heard many things about humans, and I wasn't sure what to expect. But you are different than the stories." Eric raised an eyebrow, curious. "Different?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Silara nodded, her cheeks reddening. "Yes, the stories call you ruthless. They say humans are fierce and frightening." She paused, looking away, embarrassed. "But you don't seem ruthless at all." Eric chuckled softly, and the sound surprised her. It was warm and friendly, not the laugh of a ruthless warrior. "I suppose we humans can be misunderstood sometimes," he replied. "We may look fierce, but we also value respect and kindness. And I promise, Princess, I will do my best to make this marriage as comfortable for you as possible." Solara's heart softened at his words. She could feel her fears slipping away, replaced by a small sense of trust. Eric was not only respectful, but he also understood the challenges they both faced. She felt a spark of hope, something she hadn't felt since the marriage was arranged. "Thank you, Captain Eric," she said, her voice steadying. I appreciate your kindness." They stood there, still a bit awkward, but the air between them felt lighter. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, both trying to understand this strange new bond. Solara felt the silence grow comfortable, as if they were starting to find a rhythm together. But then, Solara's father, King Velrin, entered the hall, interrupting the moment. He looked pleased, nodding approvingly as he saw them standing together. "Ah, I see you two have finally met," he said, his voice full of authority. "Good, very good." Eric turned to the king, bowing respectfully. "Yes, your majesty, I am honored to meet Princess Solara." King Velrin nodded, smiling. "We are pleased to have you, Captain Eric. This union is very important to our people. I trust that both of you will fulfill your duties." Solara felt her heart sink slightly. The reminder of duty brought back the weight of responsibility. She knew this marriage wasn't just about her or Eric. It was about peace, unity, and the future of her people. She looked at Eric, hoping he understood the same. Eric met her gaze, giving her a reassuring nod. Somehow, she felt he did understand, perhaps better than anyone else. He, too, was bound by duty, and together, they would have to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The meeting ended soon after, and as Solara left the hall, she glanced back at Eric one last time. He caught her gaze and offered a small and encouraging smile. She smiled back, feeling a mix of relief and hope. This was only the beginning, but maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. His true story. As days passed, Princess Solara found herself growing more comfortable around Captain Eric. She still had questions, though. Who was this man she was supposed to marry? Why did he seem so different from the stories of ruthless humans? One evening, Solara decided to ask him. They were in the palace gardens, the sky painted with the colors of sunset. The peaceful setting gave her the courage to speak up. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts, then turned to Eric. "Captain Eric," she began, hesitantly, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." Eric looked at her with calm, curious eyes. "Of course, Princess. You can ask me anything." Solara hesitated, her heart racing. She didn't want to offend him, but her curiosity was too strong to ignore. "The stories. They say humans are fierce and merciless, but you're not like that. I see kindness in you, patience, even gentleness. Why are you so different?" Eric listened quietly, a faint smile appearing on his face. He seemed to understand her confusion, and after a moment he nodded. "It's a fair question," he said softly. "I suppose it's time I tell you the truth about my past." Solara's interest grew, and she leaned forward, eager to listen. "I wasn't always a soldier," Eric began, his voice steady yet distant, as if remembering a different life. "I grew up on a small farm, far from any battles or wars. My family was peaceful, and we lived a simple life. My father taught me about honor and kindness, while my mother taught me patience." Solara was surprised. She had expected stories of war and battle, not peaceful farm life. Eric continued, his gaze drifting to the distant horizon. "Then, one day, a group of soldiers came to our village. They were looking for recruits, and they didn't give us much choice." His voice grew quieter. "I was taken from my family and trained as a soldier. They wanted us to be strong, unbreakable, and ready for war." Solara could hear the pain in his voice, and she felt a pang of sympathy. She had never imagined Eric's life had been so difficult. "At first, I resisted," Eric continued. "I didn't want to become a weapon. I remembered my family's teachings, the value of kindness and respect. But in the military," Showing kindness was seen as a weakness, so I hid it. I followed orders, trained hard, and became the soldier they wanted me to be. But you didn't lose yourself, Solara said softly, her eyes filled with understanding. You held on to your true nature. Eric looked at her, a hint of surprise in his eyes. Yes, he replied. I tried. Over time, I learned to balance strength with compassion. I discovered that you can be strong without being ruthless, and when I was finally allowed to leave, I knew I wanted to help others, not harm them. Solara felt a deep respect growing in her heart. Eric was not only brave but also wise. He had faced hardship and come out stronger, holding onto his values even when the world tried to change him. Eric smiled faintly, his eyes softening. When I was chosen to come here, I knew there would be misunderstandings. I heard the stories your people tell about humans, and I know they see us as dangerous. But I want you to know, Princess, that I am not here to conquer or hurt. I am here to build something better. Solara felt her heart warm at his words. She had feared him once, but now she saw him clearly. He was not a monster or a threat. He was a man with dreams and struggles, someone who had suffered but still chose kindness. Thank you for telling me your story, she said gently. It means a lot to me. Eric nodded, his gaze sincere. Thank you for listening. I know this marriage wasn't your choice, but I promise I will do everything I can to make it a partnership based on respect and understanding. They sat in silence for a moment, the sun dipping lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the gardens. For the first time, Solara felt a sense of peace about their union. She realized that Eric was someone she could trust, maybe even grow to care for. As they walked back to the palace together, Solara felt a strange new feeling in her heart, a sense of hope. She no longer saw Eric as a stranger or a feared warrior. Instead, she saw him as a man with a gentle heart and a strong spirit. In that moment, she knew that her life was about to change. But now, with Eric by her side, the future didn't seem as frightening. Perhaps, she thought, they could build something beautiful together, a bond not just of duty, but of understanding and friendship. For the first time since the marriage was arranged, Solara felt she could face the future with courage. She glanced at Eric, and he gave her a reassuring smile. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The wedding day. The day of the wedding had arrived. The palace was decorated with beautiful flowers, banners, and lights, filling every corner with color and warmth. Princess Solara watched the preparations from her chamber window, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Today, she would marry Captain Eric. Only a short time ago, the thought would have filled her with fear. But now, after learning more about Eric's past and seeing his true nature, she felt a sense of calm. He was no longer the ruthless stranger she once feared. He was a man she could trust and respect. Her ladies-in-waiting helped her prepare, dressing her in a gown that shimmered like stardust, its silver and blue colors matching the traditional attire of her people. They placed a delicate crown on her head, and as Solara looked in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. She looked like a true princess, ready to step into a new chapter of her life. As the ceremony approached, her father, King Velrin, came to escort her to the main hall. He looked proud and gave her an approving nod. "You are fulfilling a great duty today, my daughter," he said. "This marriage will unite our people and bring peace to our kingdom. I am proud of you." Solara smiled and nodded, but in her heart, she knew this was about more than duty. She wanted to build something real with Eric, not just a political alliance. Taking a deep breath, she let her father lead her to the grand hall where everyone was waiting. The hall was filled with guests, both human and alien. The sight of two different species coming together for this event felt like a symbol of hope and unity. At the end of the aisle stood Captain Eric, dressed in his formal uniform. His posture was strong, yet there was a gentleness in his expression as he waited for her. As Solara walked down the aisle, she felt her heart beating faster, but this time it wasn't from fear. She felt a warm, steady excitement. Eric's gaze met hers, and in his eyes, she saw understanding, respect, and maybe even a hint of affection. It gave her the courage to keep walking, step by step, toward her new future. When she reached him, Eric offered her his hand, and she took it, feeling the strength and warmth in his grip. The officiant began the ceremony, speaking words of unity and peace, but Solara could barely focus. Her mind was filled with thoughts of the journey that had brought her here, the fears she had overcome, the kindness she had seen in Eric, and the hopes she held for their future. As the officiant spoke, Solara stole a glance at Eric. He looked calm and focused, yet there was a softness in his eyes that made her heart flutter. He seemed to sense her gaze and gave her a small, reassuring smile, as if to say, "We're in this together." Finally, the moment came for their vows. Eric was the first to speak, and his voice was steady and sincere. "Princess Solara," he began, his words carrying a quiet strength, "I promise to respect you, to stand by your side, and to work with you to build a future of peace and trust. I may not have known what to expect when I came here, but now I know that I am honored to be part of your life." Solara felt a warmth rise in her chest, her heart touched by his words. When it was her turn, she took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "Captain Eric," she said softly, "I promise to trust you, to learn from you, and to face whatever challenges come our way together. I am grateful to have you by my side." With their vows spoken, the officiant declared them bound by marriage, and the hall erupted into applause. Eric turned to Solara, his gaze filled with warmth, and for a moment, it felt as though they were the only two people in the room. He offered her his arm, and she took it, feeling a strange sense of joy and relief. As they walked down the aisle together as husband and wife, Solara felt that this was only the beginning. The future still held uncertainties, but with Eric by her side, she felt ready to face them. Later, at the wedding feast, Solara and Eric sat side by side, watching as their people celebrated. They shared a few quiet moments, talking and laughing, their connection growing stronger with each passing minute. She could feel the awkwardness fading away, replaced by something deeper, a friendship, a partnership, and perhaps, in time, something more. As the evening drew on, Solara looked at Eric, feeling a sense of gratitude she couldn't put into words. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. For the first time, Solara felt truly at peace. She wasn't just marrying a soldier or fulfilling her duty. She was building a life with someone who understood her, respected her, and cared for her. And in that moment, she knew that, together, they could create something beautiful, a new beginning. The morning after the wedding was calm and peaceful. The palace was still, and the sunlight streamed through the windows, bathing the rooms in a soft golden light. Princess Solara woke up beside Captain Eric, feeling a sense of contentment she had never known before. She had expected the wedding to feel like an obligation, something she had to do for the good of her people. But the reality was different. It felt like the beginning of something new, something real. She could feel the bond between her and Eric growing stronger with each passing moment. Eric was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, looking out at the view of the gardens. His face was calm, but there was a light in his eyes that spoke of happiness, a quiet joy that she hadn't seen before. When he noticed she was awake, he turned to her with a smile. "Good morning, Princess," he said softly, his voice full of warmth. Solara smiled back, feeling a sense of peace that surprised her. "Good morning, Eric." They both sat in silence for a moment, enjoying the quiet. Solara felt a strange sense of comfort, like everything was falling into place. She had feared this day for so long, but now it felt like a new chapter in her life was unfolding, one full of possibility. "I've been thinking," Eric said after a while, breaking the silence. "We have a lot ahead of us, don't we?" Solara nodded. "Yes, a new beginning. Together." Eric looked at her, his eyes serious but kind. "I know the road won't always be easy. There will be challenges, and I know you've had a lot of pressure on you to make this work. But I promise, I will do my best to make sure we build something good together, something you can be proud of." Solara felt a warmth in her chest at his words. She had always been expected to carry the weight of her people's hopes, but now, with Eric by her side, she didn't feel so alone. They would face the challenges together, as equals, as partners. "I trust you," she said simply, her voice steady. Eric smiled again, and for the first time, Solara saw a flicker of something more in his eyes. It was a look of hope, of the future they could create together. The thought made her heart swell with a mix of excitement and joy. After a few moments, they both stood and walked out to the balcony that overlooked the gardens. The bright colors of the flowers were in full bloom, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of fresh blossoms. It was a beautiful sight, one that made Solara feel hopeful for what lay ahead. "This is where we'll begin," Eric said, looking out at the gardens. "Our future, side by side." Solara nodded, her gaze on the flowers below. "Yes, side by side." As the day went on, the couple spent time together, talking about their hopes and dreams for the future. They discussed how they could bring peace and unity to their people, how they could create a world where both humans and aliens could live together in harmony. The future seemed uncertain, but together they felt ready to face whatever came their way. That afternoon, they walked through the palace gardens, hand in hand. Solara had never imagined she would find peace like this, not after all the fear and uncertainty she had felt in the past. But now, walking beside Eric, she realized that the future wasn't something to fear. It was something to build, something to embrace. As they walked, they came to a small, quiet pond in the center of the garden. The water was still, reflecting the sky above. Eric stopped and turned to Solara. "We've already made a good start," he said softly. "But this is just the beginning. There's so much more ahead of us. I don't know what it will look like, but I know I want to face it with you." Solara's heart fluttered at his words. It felt like everything was falling into place. The fear that had once controlled her life was gone, replaced by a sense of hope. She could see the future now, not as a burden, but as a journey they would take together. "I feel the same way," she replied. "We've taken the first step, and now we can walk forward together." Eric smiled at her, his eyes filled with trust and affection. Together. As they stood there, the world around them seemed to pause, and for a moment, all that mattered was the promise they had made to each other. It wasn't just a promise of marriage. It was a promise of partnership, of facing life's challenges side by side. They knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be struggles, moments of doubt, and difficult decisions. But for the first time, Solara felt confident that they could handle it. They had